So starting off, could you tell us a bit more about who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you interested in blue light, circadian rhythm, those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, my name's Andy Mant. I am a British guy that moved to Australia about a decade ago. And I started my health journey probably about 8 years ago. Became very overweight. My lifestyle was terrible. Like I just really sort of lazed around, didn't really do much, ate terribly. But I tried dieting, tried going to the gym. None of it really worked, which led me to sort of start taking a look at the academic literature in so much of, well, what was the actual peer-reviewed studies and saying about sort of diet and exercise. And I dived deep into the literature and found out specific dieting protocols that really worked for me. I got in shape and my health improved. And that, one thing that always didn't really work well since I was about 14. And when I was, it's probably quite interesting to mention, because obviously your podcast is all about hormones. 14 for a guy is probably that sort of time they're starting to have a lot of hormonal changes, themselves. And I just couldn't sleep well from sort of about 14 until about sort of 5-6 years ago. And I had no idea why. I just thought, that's just what it is. My mum and my dad were the same. They just never really slept that well. So I just put it down to genetics and carried on. But when I obviously got some really good results from, looking at academic literature regards to health and nutrition, I thought I've got to look into this a little bit more and see if there's anything out there about sleep. And that's what really got me interested in it. And I stumbled across a lot of studies that suggested that a disrupted circadian rhythm can lead to bad sleep. And then I always used to be quite active on forums and then Facebook and Twitter. And I started following some people on there that were really talking a lot about how light impacted circadian rhythm. So I started to read and research a lot more and found that if we expose ourselves to artificial light in the blue and green range after sunset, it can disrupt melatonin, which can impair our sleep quality. And the solution to this, and there's a few studies out there that show this in clinical trials, that if you wear blue light blocking glasses after sunset, you can increase the amount of melatonin you produce and get better sleep. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to go on Amazon, buy myself a cheap pair of blue blockers. And they were sort of like a pale amber color. I popped them on and I literally had the best night's sleep I'd ever had. I didn't sleep all the way through, but I felt more refreshed after wearing these glasses. And I was really pleased with this. I wore them for a couple of weeks and then my sleep regressed again. And I was just like, oh, well, what's going on here? And it just sort of came to me and I was thinking to myself, well, when you look at sort of the quantum physics of light from my research, there was a specific area of blue and green light you needed to block in order to optimize melatonin, and that was between 400 and 550 nanometers. We don't need to get into the deep science about that. It's basically all the blue spectrum and half of the green spectrum. 100% of that needs to be blocked. And I was fortunate enough to have some mates in an optics lab here in Australia. So being the geek I was at this time, I'd accumulated quite a few different blue light glasses. My wife had a few pairs. We took them to the lab and they said that they could test them with their lab grade spectrometer. And they tested these glasses, and every single pair of the glasses that we checked, just the cheap pairs you get on Amazon or eBay and some of the more popular brands actually from websites, we found that not one of them even blocked all the blue light, let alone green light. So these glasses weren't doing what they were advertised to do. So I said to the guys in the lab, I said, well, I know exactly what I need to block according to peer-reviewed clinical trials. Can you create me lenses to do that? And they said, yeah, it's not a problem. We can just do that. They didn't really understand it, but they did as they're told and created these lenses. And then I sent them out to a few top influencers that were talking about light, who already wore blue light blocking glasses, and said to them, try these glasses and just let me know what you think. Here's all the evidence that's gone into them. They're made in labs in Australia, not in China. Let me know what your thoughts are. And these are people like Luke Story, Bill Lagercross, Lacey Phillips, people like that kind of knew what they were talking about in terms of light, but probably didn't take such a deep dive that maybe I had done. So I sent them to these people, and maybe about 20 in total, and every single one of them came back to me going like, you've got something here, it's a game changer, our sleep is so much better, we're feeling great. And this was after like just a few uses, and that was how BLUblox was born. And ever since, it started, it's grown, which has been great. We've providing all the education and evidence behind light, because a lot of brands out there are really jumping on the bandwagon of blue light's a buzzword, let's get some glasses from China and flog them on the internet. And it's just not as simple as that, because there's so many flaws with these glasses we can talk about obviously later if it comes up. But when we're trying to focus on optimizing hormones and mental health, we don't want to leave anything on the table. We want optimal every single time, and that's what we set out to create. So that's really my journey to date, and it was a good sort of 18 months worth of diving into the literature before I even considered starting a company. So I really got that grounding in light, quantum biology, and I guess a little bit on the biophysics side of light as well, which really helped me explain the product, but also create the best product that was that could be made, really.
Absolutely. I can tell you're so passionate about it because it's helping you. And once you know something is so effective, you just can't help but spread the word on that. But with your usage of the just cheap Amazon ones and it helping you, why do you think that was? Do you think it was like a placebo effect initially, that even I've noticed a slight benefit with using the cheaper ones, not as much as the BLUblox ones, but do you think they do help somewhat, or is it just a placebo?
Yeah, I don't think it's a placebo effect. I think it's a scale. And I think melatonin, when you're not wearing any eye protection, so blue light glasses, and you've got all the house lights on, you're watching TV, scrolling through your phone, I think you're going to be producing very minimal amounts of melatonin. When you wear a pair of cheap sort of amber glasses that's not blocking all that light, I think you can increase the amount of melatonin you're producing. However, to maximize out what your body can naturally produce in that specific hormone, melatonin, you need physiological darkness, which is the absence of light between 400 and 550 nanometers, which none of these glasses block. So what I think happened was, in my instance, and this would probably be in a lot of other people's instances, they get these glasses on, which is a step up from what they're doing, which is having their naked eyes look at artificial blue and green light. They're cutting probably, say, 50 to 80% of that light out, and then ultimately having more melatonin and a better sleep. But as the eyes then get used to that, it's still not enough to produce the optimal amounts of melatonin. So it's very clear in the evidence that it's 100% within that banding that I suggested you need to block. And when you actually start blocking 100% in that range, this is when you start seeing that, wow, this is a level up. You don't know it until you've tried it. It's very much like dieting, you see. You could think you're following a good diet. You could be following a carnivore diet. You could be following a vegan diet, whatever diet takes your fancy. But you might get some good results on that in the short term, but in the long term, are those diets going to be the best for you? You don't know until you've tried it, other diets, or tried it for the long term. So, light's very much the same. You can sort of get by with a bit of sort of haphazard, half-assed light management for a while, but in 20 years time, when you're developing hormonal issues or your hormones aren't balanced as such, you would have wished back then that you went for that optimal route. So it's all about, I guess, optimizing everything for me. I don't want something that's going to help people a little bit. I want something that is going to be the best product out there to be able to help people. And if I can't manufacture that product myself, I won't release it. If it's 99%, I won't release it. It has to be the most optimal. And I think that, it's just people's hormones and health that we're talking about. And I'm like you said, I'm so passionate about helping. I don't want people to be sort of half-assed with it. It's got to be the whole hog. So yeah, in answer to your question, I don't think it's placebo. I think it's just better than nothing, these amber glasses. But when you go up to that sort of deep amber and red, and you're blocking within that range that the science says you should block in, that's when you really level up and you really start noticing it very quickly.
Yeah. And I think if people are already wanting to make that positive shift by purchasing some glasses and invested in that, I think you might as well just go for the best on the market to get the full results, like you said. And with blue light, we sometimes hear that it's a natural thing from sunlight. So how does that differ from the blue light that you're talking about? Or is it just that timing of the blue light exposure that's the issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at blue light in isolation, okay, so blue light in isolation has these characteristics. It increases cortisol, it increases dopamine, it increases serotonin, okay? They're the good things if it's in isolation. You want that during the day. It also does some negative things, okay? So blue light is very high energy, so it damages cells in your skin and in your eyes. It excites obviously molecules in your body, which can cause things like dry eyes, headaches, that type of thing. So nature always has a counter sort of balance to things to restore homeostasis. Now, artificial light is very much blue light in isolation. Okay, so there's not really much of any other color in it. There's a lot of blue, a lot of green, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of orange, and pretty much no red. Okay, and that's in LED artificial fluorescent lights. Now, when you look at sunlight is balanced in every single color. So the amount of blue, green, yellow, amber, and red is all pretty much the same. Now, what each color in the spectrum does is it does something different to our hormones and our physiological well-being. And red light, for instance, which is at the complete other end of the spectrum of blue, is a restorative color. It restores, it repairs, and protects. So, for instance, if you're outside during the day and blue light, you're being exposed to blue light, you're getting all those amazing benefits because it's natural, it's coming in from the sun, but it is still damaging your skin and it is still damaging your eyes. However, the red light in the sun is repairing any of that cell damage and clearing out any dead cells and repairing and regenerating the damage that the blue is causing. So that's why it's a very good source of light, natural light. The issue with blue light is because it doesn't have any of that red light in it and it's very high in blue, we're getting cortisol switched on from not just the daylight hours, but during the nighttime as well, when there should actually naturally and ancestrally be no blue light. But we're also getting too much blue light into our eyes, too much cell damage, too much mitochondrial damage, and then none of the restorative red light because we're rarely going outside to get the counter effects. So that is why blue light is so bad. During the day, it's too much of it, no repair, digital eye strain, macular degeneration, headaches, migraines, fatigue. After dark, when you look at our ancestors, they would have sat around a campfire maybe. That's all red light and orange light. Whereas now we're coming home, we're switching on our lights, which is in essence telling our brain to keep cortisol levels high, which is not good because after dark we need low levels of cortisol because melatonin can only be released in the absence of blue light after dark optimally, but also cortisol levels need to be lower for melatonin to be secreted. So we've just got to be very mindful that, how we evolved ancestrally was under a circadian rhythm. So a circadian rhythm is, it's Latin, circa and dian, about a day. So all the cells in our body run on this circadian rhythm and it basically matches the spin of the earth. So during the day, cues from light, from the sun, tell our brain that it's daytime to release specific hormones and neuropeptides. And then after the sun sets and darkness sets in and we just have firelight, those signals of light and darkness send messages to our brains to switch off other hormones like cortisol, switch on melatonin, for instance. So when we're putting on these little alien suns in our house after dark, like our TV, our smartphone, our LED lights, opening the fridge to cook dinner, there's an LED light in there. That blue light sends a message to our brain that it's daytime, keep cortisol levels high, and then don't produce as much melatonin. So we wreck our sleep, we feel really crappy the next day, really fatigued and tired. And we think we can cope in the short term. And we probably can in our 20s because, I remember in my 20s going out for 2 nights over a weekend on the beers and getting in at 3 a.m. and then getting up at about midday and doing the same thing again. But now you get a bit older, you realize, wow, that was wreaking havoc on my circadian rhythms, and you start to develop issues. And in my case, it was gaining a lot of weight and having a lot of health issues like kidney stones and having my appendix out in my sort of mid-20s. So these things, you know, you can cope with in the short term, but in the long term, you're going to lead to things like hormone disruption can lead to chronic issues in, you know, things like sort of anxiety, depression, stress, and, you know, fertility issues as well, and insomnia. And you're seeing all these issues now in the younger generation, the millennials that have grown up under more intense artificial light, and they are getting anxiety in their teens and 20s, they're getting depression, they're getting obesity a lot younger. Blue light negatively impacts in isolation blood glucose levels. It makes them rise, along with microwaves, EMF, Wi-Fi. So we've put ourselves in this environment and our kids in this environment where, you know, diseases that and mental health issues that perhaps people got in their 60s, 70s and 80s from our parents' point of view, people are now getting in their teens and 20s, and it's, you know, light is contributing, and misappropriated light management is contributing to this epidemic when you actually look at some of the literature.
Absolutely. And I know it's hard to know an exact number, but just in your opinion, how much do you think is due to light and circadian rhythm imbalances with some of these chronic health issues or hormonal imbalances and sleep disturbances, as opposed to the diet and lifestyle, high sugar intake, imbalanced blood sugar, environmental toxins? Like, what ratio do you think sleep and circadian rhythm play?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and, you know, most of the light gurus would sit here and say 100%, but I don't classify myself as a guru. I classify myself as an evidence-based sort of practitioner, and I don't think one thing regards to lifestyle is more important than the next. But I feel that if one of them is out of sync, you might as well not bother with the others. So, for instance, I believe that light management is very, very key. Light hygiene has to be corrected. I think that you need to address your non-native EMF exposure. I believe that people need to ground more and be also exposed to more extremes in temperature, so cold and heat. I believe that nutrition plays a key role when it comes to seasonality of eating in line with your genealogy and ancestry. And I also believe that exercise plays a key role. Now, one thing that covers so all these are sort of, in my mind, like vertical sort of pillars of health. And then what sits above every single one of them is circadian rhythms. And each one of those facets that I've spoken about all comes down to circadian timing. So the time you eat your food, the time you exercise, the time you want to ground, the time you want to expose yourself to blue light, red light, green lights, etc. It all comes back to circadian rhythms. And you know, it's light is the biggest cue of our master clock, and the master clock is located sort of right in the middle of the brain, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it's entrained by light. Okay, but every single cell in our body has its own circadian rhythm as well. It has its own little clock. So I like to explain that you have an orchestra of clocks. So the orchestra is made up of lots of different instruments. So say, for instance, your liver clock, your pancreas clock, your skin clock, your heart clock, your brain clock, everything, all very different, okay? Now, the main conductor of that orchestra is your central clock, which is entrained by light. So if that central conductor is off, it's sort of conducting, the peripheral clocks in all the other cells aren't going to function properly. And the same is true the other way around. If the peripheral clocks aren't functioning properly, so if your pancreas clock isn't functioning properly, you're going to have a problem with insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance, blood glucose problems. If your liver clock isn't functioning well, you're going to have problems with liver-related diseases. If you're going to have an off heart circadian rhythm, you're going to have heart problems. So you need to sync each and every clock in your body in line with that master clock. And the ways to do that is in training your brain and the master clock through sunlight in the morning when the sun rises, that entrains the master clock, but also having your largest meal at the beginning of the day within 4 hours of wakening to entrain those sort of liver and pancreas and digestive clocks. And you also find that when you've got a properly functioning circadian rhythm, leptin, ghrelin, and neuropeptides are also optimal in the morning period. So that's when you want to be eating. They're not optimal after dark. You're more insulin resistant after dark. You're more insulin resistant if you eat under artificial light. Studies have shown this. And then to entrain your skeletal muscle clock, you want to be working out in the morning. So you want all these clocks entrained at the same time, or you're going to throw off that hormonal balance within your system. So, you know, you may have, say, and these are just throwaway numbers, 100 clocks in your body, in your organs or what have you, and then you've got your master clock. If 99 of those clocks are functioning correctly, but your, I don't know, say the clock system in your ovaries or in your placenta is not functioning properly, very high areas of melatonin production in those two areas, by the way, then you could be in 99% peak physical fitness and condition, but you'll be more susceptible to developing ovarian cancer or polycystic ovary condition. So you've got to just make sure that it's not this sort of, you know, throwaway, like, right, it's all about light, it's all about timing of light. Yes, it is, it's very important, don't get me wrong, but you've got to look at the circadian aspects of other clock systems as well. And to be fair, when you start looking at the literature behind this, it's not as daunting as I sort of make out. It's more or less the same in every situation. Like people that go to bed earlier will have, like, just from a reproductive standpoint, people who go to bed earlier will be able to conceive a lot easier. Men will have higher testosterone levels, less sort of sperm antibodies. Estrogen levels will be more balanced in women that go to bed early and wake with the sunrise. So when you actually start looking at the literature, it is actually a lot of similarities in each of how each of the clock system works. So as long as you're getting up in the morning, watching the sunrise, managing light throughout the day, not exposing yourself to artificial light after dark, wearing blue light glasses, etc., and doing a few other hacks related to light, which we can come on to later, you're going to have a good time, you know, really mastering your hormones.
Definitely. So it seems like there's not one body system that light doesn't affect, and that's a pretty powerful thing. And I think some people, especially in places like the UK or in winter months, they think that the room lighting is probably even brighter than the outdoor lighting. So what's the difference? So when you step outside, even if it's a cloudy day, are we still getting the benefits there? Or is it places like in Australia where you are, where it's summer currently, is that when we get the most benefits?
Yeah, look, it's a lot easier when, you know, with me sat here in Australia with 300 days of sunshine a year. So, but I'm from the UK, so I understand how depressing that place can be in the winters. You know, there's a seasonal affective disorder. The glasses I'm actually wearing now, the yellow ones, are designed to combat that in the winter, which is interesting. It's color therapy and taking out specific frequencies of the light that can cause that. The issue we have in the UK is not so much the lack of the sun, it's the lack of us getting out in the sun during those cold periods. Now, there's something that was basically produced wartime, and I believe it was produced to allow for farmers to get extra time in the winter or summer, sorry, to actually harvest their crops and support the, I guess, the population, because we were at war and imports of food was obviously was very low. It was something called daylight savings. Now, this has really sort of screwed up the UK because we don't have it here in WA, which is fantastic. So I can get up nice and early and go to bed early. But when you're moving around the clocks, I guess when you're moving time, you're not actually changing the pattern of the sun, okay? The sun still rises at the same time it would, because time is obviously like a man-made invention. What the issue is working hours. We're working in this Fordian era still of 9 to 5 working, Monday to Friday. But when we start altering the time of, you know, moving it forward or back an hour, we're actually manipulating how much of the sun we can see. And I remember in the UK going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. Whereas if they didn't mess around with daylight savings, I would have more time to actually get sun in during the day in the winter months. So people need to realize that, you know, it's not the lack of sun, it's the lack of actually being out in the sun, because you still get good benefits from being outside in the day in cloudy conditions. And one example of that is my brother-in-law in the UK. He is a woodsman. So he works outside every day, come rain or shine. And literally all year round, this guy has an amazing tan. Even in the winter, he's tanned, and he's, you know, of Celtic origin. So he is living proof, anecdotally, because it's only in one person, that he is outside constantly. He's not wearing sunscreen. He's exposing himself to the light in the winter months. He's always got this all-round year tan, like, you know, on him. So he's obviously getting enough sun exposure. Now you compare that to someone that's sat in an office, okay? They're not seeing the sun at all. So they're not getting any of the benefits from this balanced spectrum of reds, greens, blues, ambers. All they're getting is this artificial light that's very high in blue. It's keeping cortisol levels high all the time. People are feeling fatigued because they're just getting chronic stress from this cortisol level being high continuously. And then come, I think, what is it, the 1st or 2nd February in the UK is like the highest amount of suicides every year, because people are so depressed and down following, you know, months of crappy light exposure, that they end up, you know, getting to a state of really poor mental health and doing, you know, really bad things to themselves. Whereas if people started to get outside more and started to balance their hormones from, you know, natural sources of light like the sun, they wouldn't have such high levels of anxiety and depression from working indoors. So a lot of it's a double-edged sword. Like, it's not good to be working under artificial light, and you can wear a lot of protection, like the yellow glasses that I'm wearing, perfect for the winter months because you're exposed to more artificial light and less natural light. But, you know, that is only half of the equation. The other half of the equation is that you need to be outside. I can't stress that enough. You need to be out in that morning. You need to be out in the afternoon. You need to be out in the evening, letting your eyes see this light, whether it's raining or snowing or cloudy in the UK. And you can do this. People might say, oh, well, I can't do it. You know, I'm in work. Well, yeah, you can. Smokers go out for smoke breaks. You're going out for a breath of fresh air for 5 minutes, because you don't need long. You just need a few minutes in the sun in the morning to allow light to pass through your eyes, get the sunglasses off, and send a message to your brain that, oh, it's this time of the day. I can release these hormones. And blocking the artificial light after dark as well, to not tell your brain it's still daytime. We're just devoid of darkness in the winter months. And it's quite ironic because it's dark outside, yet we put all these lights on and we literally cannot switch off. And we've got to remember as well that, you know, we got to adhere and obey to the latitude that we live in. And by that, I mean that in winter months, I will typically sleep more than I do in summer months. The nights are longer and there is less sunshine. It's just, you know, it's basic sort of astrophysics. It's how the earth is moving, and you are going to get less daylight hours, but I sleep longer. You know, some animals hibernate during these months. I'm not saying to hibernate to people, but, you know, you sleep more. Yeah, I know, it'd be amazing. Yeah. Sleep more, and don't worry about that. And in the summer, when you know, you've got a proper circadian rhythm, I'm up at like 4:35 in the morning with the sunrise, and then I'm in bed by like sort of 9:30 at night, and I have a lot more energy in the summer. But we need to embrace this a little bit more and not be. A lot of people in the biohacking sort of side of things seem to think that, right, sleep is 8 hours a night regardless of the season, and that's so incorrect. Light is the governor of sleep, and sleep basically can be, you know, it can be 10 hours in the winter, it can be 6 hours in the summer. As long as our circadian rhythm is functioning correctly, our brains and hormones will dictate to us how much sleep or how little sleep we need depending on the seasons. And you know, people need to move away from the fact that it's just an 8-hour sleep cycle that we need. It's nonsense. It really is. And it's hard to explain to people, because people will listen to this thinking, oh, wow, you know, this is really far-fetched stuff. But until you actually do this and start getting up and watching every sunrise in the morning. I was never a morning person. I used to get up at like midday, as I mentioned. But once I started doing maybe a couple of weeks of forcing myself up in the morning, I literally cannot lie in anymore. Like, a lie in to me is like sort of maybe 6 a.m. And even then I feel revolting getting out of bed. So, you know, you just have to do it. And then your body, once it's syncing correctly and that orchestra is all in harmony with all the other clocks, you almost don't have to think about it. Your body tells you this is time for bed. This is time to get up. And it's all natural and you just feel great. And it's like, you know, caffeine, one thing that I used to be addicted to, I don't drink any of it now. Number one, it made me feel very anxious, but two, it's a really bad adenosine receptor blocker, which basically doesn't allow you to sleep very well. I drop that, but from getting up in the morning watching the sunrise, I get such a hit of dopamine and serotonin that I feel awake almost instantly now. So it's just getting into these habits and pushing yourself to do it for a couple of weeks, and your health and hormones will thank you in the long run.
Yeah, sunlight is nature's caffeine. We can all think of it that way and try and get the benefits without all of the jitteriness and anxiety that can come with it. And with, I have a few follow-on questions from that. So with your, do you say it was your brother-in-law who was or your brother who works outside? What are your thoughts on sunscreen? So people who use it pretty much all year round to protect against skin cancer or premature aging, does that in any way affect our circadian rhythm? Or is it just what we get through our eyes that is the most important? And also, what are your thoughts on the light therapy lamps or the SAD lamps? So if someone is at a desk, could they plug something like that in and find some benefit when they can't get outside?
Absolutely. I think you've got quite a few questions in there. So forgive me if I miss any, and just circle back and put me back in. So your first one was on sunscreen. Okay. Now, context needs to be applied to sunscreen. Okay. If you've got a messed up circadian rhythm and you're going out in the sun in the middle of the afternoon without seeing the sunrise, then you're going to have a problem regardless to whether you wear sunscreen or not. You're going to burn. Nature changes the composition in terms of light spectrometry of the sun throughout the day. In the morning, you have very high levels of infrared light and very low levels of ultraviolet light. Now, ultraviolet light, which I refer to as UV from now on, is the light that everyone likes to demonize as causing skin cancer. It's a sort of a double-edged sword. It's like a yes and a no answer to this, okay? So in the mornings, when you're watching the sunrise, you're also building something in your skin called melanin. Now, melanin is reflected in a tan, okay? So people sometimes in the UK used to call it a base tan before they went to Spain and burnt. But they build up this tan, okay, in the mornings, okay? It has to be in the mornings. Now, what melanin does is it absorbs and filters UV light. So if you miss that beginning bit of the sun, so say the sun rises at 7 a.m., so if you're not out in the sun between 7 and 9 a.m., for instance, that first 2 hours where UV light is low and infrared light is high, and then go out in the sun when the UV light starts to come out, you've got no protection. Then you put your sunscreen on, which is full of chemicals, which is causing all sorts of issues. It keeps you out in the sun longer anyway, which isn't good. And then you're literally going to burn it anyway. And if you don't, you're actually getting no UV light, which is actually not good in itself as well. So if your circadian rhythm is correct, then there's no need for sunscreen. So I haven't worn sunscreen for about 5 years. I was in the Middle East last year, didn't burn. It was like 45 degrees. Our summers here about 40, 45 degrees centigrade. No burning there. I was in the Maldives for 10 days from 6 a.m. sunrise to 6 p.m. sunset. No sunscreen on, no sunglasses, didn't burn. Because my circadian rhythm is functioning correctly, I'm always up with the rising sun, and I have very high levels of melanin throughout the year, much like my brother-in-law. But if I didn't do that, and I went to the Maldives and I didn't put sunscreen on, I would burn to a crisp and I would cause a lot of damage. Now, the damage in your skin from sunburn is caused by UV light. Now, we need UV light, okay? UV light synthesizes with cholesterol and it produces something called vitamin D. Now, when you look at the academic literature, all-cause mortality increases as vitamin D levels in humans decrease. Now, in Australia, as I mentioned, we get 300 days of sunshine a year. We have the lowest levels of vitamin D in the world, and we have the highest levels of skin cancer in the world. So you can put 2 and 2 together there and be like, wow, slip, slap, slop is not working here for Australians. And the reason being is twofold. And this is just my opinion, okay? And I've seen studies to this effect, but obviously there are counter studies to this out there as well. So I'm not recommending throwing away the sunscreen. It's just my thoughts. And if people want to do it, totally up to them. Is number one, we have our own circadian system in our skin, okay? And it works independently to the master clock. So like I said, every cell in the body has its own clock system. And during the day, the clock system in the skin it's in that sort of active mode, okay? So it's not in any kind of repair, it's just in active mode. And during the day, we then get a lot of, benefits through our skin, but we also get some damage. Pollutants hit our skin, EMFs hit our skin, dirt and germs hit our skin, and UV light will damage the skin. It's unequivocal evidence out there. UV light will damage your skin. Even though there's benefits in getting vitamin D, it will damage your skin. Now, this is the clever thing. And 3 weeks ago, a study came out proving this, which was really interesting, is that the skin needs periods of complete darkness in order to heal and go into its repair mode. So again, like the sun has both blue and red light, nature always gives us an antidote to the problems caused. Now, the problem in the day is UV light causing a bit of skin damage, a bit of redness to the skin from a bit of sunburn or a bit of pinkness. But we're going home after a day at the beach. We're missing out on the sunset, which contains healing properties of red light. We're going home, switching on the artificial lights, exposing ourselves to blue light, telling our skin it can stay in the active phase and not be in the repair phase. So basically, it's not, this artificial light isn't allowing the skin to repair the UV damage. So is UV light really causing skin cancers, or is it causing damage to the skin, but we're not allowing our skin to repair itself in the absence of blue and green light after dark? And even when we sleep now, we have car headlights coming in, street lamps, neighbors, partner getting up to go to the bathroom in the night or whatever, not allowing our skin to be in that restorative mode. And what you also find as well is with these people is that they'll do all that other stuff that I've just mentioned, but they also won't sleep well because of that. Now, we've mentioned melatonin as a sleep hormone. It's actually the most powerful antioxidant that we can produce internally. It's a free radical scavenger, a reactive oxygen species cleaner upper. And the fact that we're not allowing ourselves to produce that melatonin after dark, we're getting less of that repair hormone that's going through our bodies, cleaning up all the dead and dying cells, and then leaving us susceptible to skin cancers, other cancers, maybe neurological diseases because the brain isn't getting cleared out properly. So when it comes to the sun, circadian rhythm is very, very important, but context does still need to be applied. And the second reason, another study that's actually out there, shows that light passing through our eyes tells us what time of day it is, okay? So when we wear sunglasses outside during the day to protect against UV, which I don't feel you should if you've got a correct circadian rhythm, those sunglasses are filtering out specific frequencies of light, specifically UV, a lot of the blue, a lot of the reds, a lot of pretty much everything, which is then sending the incorrect light signal to our brain to tell us, well, maybe it isn't the middle of the day. Maybe I don't need to be protective against UV because my eyes are receiving light, but it's not receiving any UV light. So it can't be present. It must be nighttime. So we don't need to put the protective sort of mechanisms in place to filter that UV correctly, which means that wearing sunglasses is actually telling your body that it's nighttime, which is causing you to burn quicker. And again, this is a study that has been conducted and it's out there in the peer-reviewed literature that has shown that this could be a major problem in today's society. So yeah, I guess that covers the sunscreen side of things.
I was going to ask, one of my clients was actually asking, do you know I was going to talk to you today? And she said that she was contact lenses that are have UV protection in, but she was saying that they don't change the temperature of the light. So I'm guessing I think that's answered my question. Would they still be having an effect on circadian rhythm? And
not as bad as sunglasses, but UV light will still send a signal to the brain to help tell you the time of the day. So she needs to not wear them if she can. It's very difficult to find contact lenses without UV. Now, another thing that UV light does in the retina is that it's the one frequency of light that actually passes through your retina and mixes with something called DHA, which is located in very high quantities in the eye. And when it does that, it actually helps to intensify and create a DC electric current through the body. And a DC electric current will actually improve heteroplasmy rates, help in redox potential of cells, and also allow us to heal from any inflammation that we have during the day. Now, on the same side of that, I mentioned grounding earlier. So that's putting our bare feet on the grass or on the sand, because the earth conducts a DC electric current. And when we actually connect to the earth, hence the tree huggers that go and hug trees and stand barefoot on the grass and on the sand, are trying to embrace more DC electric current from the earth in order to help reduce inflammation. And there's some good studies out there, and a good friend of mine, Tim Gray, who's the CEO of the Health Optimization Summit in London in the UK, has released some trials that he's got from various doctors that have shown that after 3 hours of just having more DC electric current through the body, through grounding or through allowing UV light to pass through your eyes, the blood actually flows better, inflammation levels drop. So you can actually see how important UV light is in terms of allowing that DC electric current to intensify in the body. And you can't do that if you're filtering out UV light from your eyes.
Interesting. Do you know of any brands that do, like if she needs contact lenses, would you just prefer her to use her regular glasses, or do they also contain UV filters? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I would ask your optometrist that question. I don't know any brands that are out there that would do that. A lot of them are just as standard now because it's seen UV has been demonized, much like blue light's been demonized, and context has to be applied to that as well. Yeah. So my advice, if she can't find any with the UV filter, is to keep her glass, get rid of the contacts for a start, wear glasses, and then periodically throughout the day, just take them off for maybe 30 seconds and just sort of allow the light to pass through your eyes, maybe, 5-6 times a day minimum, and then she'll be completely fine.
Yeah, that's a great tip. And then the second part of my question, sorry, I threw like 3 at one, yeah, 3 in 1 at you, but was about sad lamps, and if they would be a good thing to have on the desk to at least get some benefits, and then trying to have those 5-minute breaks every couple of hours while someone's an office worker.
Yeah, look, sad lamps, they do have their purpose. They emit a lot of blue light, which I've mentioned earlier increases dopamine and serotonin. So it's going to make you feel good, okay? But it's like anything, dopamine is a reward system, okay? So you'll get it from, say, eating chocolate, cheese for me, like, God, I'd literally just not buy it. It's so nice. To other real serious things like cocaine, sex, things like that. If you have too much dopamine, you become more and more resistant to it, and then you need more and more of that to get the same benefit of feeling great. So the issue you've got with things like seasonal affective disorder is that, in my opinion, and looking at a lot of the literature out there, we're ODing on too much artificial light during the day, becoming more resistant to it, getting the sad lamp, sticking that in our face and getting that, oh, this is good for a bit. And then it's only intensifying the problem. It's only feeding and fueling that dopamine addiction to that blue light. So look, do I think that they have their place? I think they do in the chronically depressed in the short term. But like you alluded to there, you have to be outside constantly during those winter months and you will feel so much better. And the winter also has something else that is really, really beneficial to the circadian system and to our general feeling of mood, and that's cold. So cold therapy is very, very important. And I'm not saying go and jump in an ice lake straight away, but build up to it. Go outside in the cold and, start taking off layers of clothes and try and expose yourself to that cold. And you'll find that your mood you'll feel invigorated. You'll feel, really good. And it's easy for me to do because it's 35 degrees today here in Australia. I'll go and have a nice cold shower and I'll feel amazing. And that's not a problem, but it's very different in the UK and I get that. And you just got to ease up to it. And the cold showers are great. They've done absolute wonders for me, like putting them on and it really just gets you going in the morning. And even if it's something in the UK, like maybe not having your heating on for a couple of mornings and getting ready in the cold, and it will really, really help your sort of, your mental health, your hormones. It will make you feel invigorated without having to spike dopamine, which blue light does good during the day. But when we start having all these, exposure to all these fake devices, we're getting it in quantities that our body isn't used to. And, you see people that, a lot of people in the media will say, oh, people have got a social media addiction. People have got an addiction to gaming. Yeah, that might be true. And I'm not saying it isn't, but have they got an addiction to dopamine, which is being released from the amount of blue light that they're taking in during the day as well? Maybe it's not just the social pressures of social media. Maybe it's something to do with the light composition, teens are blasting into their face as well. And one thing that I'm sorry, I'm segueing off into something else.
I'm loving it.
I need to say it before I forget. One thing that we've seen increase rapidly in the population, especially in females, is Hashimoto's and thyroid related issues. And it's very important for women because it's the hub of all their hormones right in there. And what are they doing in offices during the day? They've got a computer screen right in front of them, like here, like I'm looking at, like you're looking at, blasting blue light into our thyroid, which is only located a few millimeters under the skin, and actually disrupting how it functions, because the thyroid will have its own clock system, and we're constantly bombarding it with blue light, which is causing it to become hypo or hyper in nature. So we're seeing a rise in Hashimoto. So I say to a lot of women, when you're at work, wear a scarf around your neck, protect that very vulnerable area from exposure to blue light and from EMFs. Cover it up. And men typically these days, I mean, I can't grow much of one, but a lot of guys have beards which will cover the thyroid. They typically, in the UK, for instance, not so much Australia, they'll wear a shirt and tie, which will cover the thyroid. So it seems to be that women who typically wear more, and I'm not saying really low cut tops here, but ones that sort of have a V in, probably a bit like what you've got there. It sort of exposes that sort of neckline. You're leaving yourself more susceptible to damage from the blue light on the thyroid as well. So people need to be cognizant of that as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna zip my jacket up right now. That's a really good tip. I don't have Hashimoto's. My mum has it, so that is definitely on my radar. So let's zip this right up for the rest of
that's brilliant. Yeah,
the rest of the podcast. Yeah, good idea, because I work online primarily, so I can go outside whenever I want, so that's a positive. But I am behind a screen a lot. So love that tip. That's going to stay up there. Maybe not the most comfortable, but I've not heard that one before.
Get a nice scarf. And no, it's definitely something that needs to be looked at. And I've mentioned it on quite a lot of the podcasts I've been on. A lot of people have messaged in to say, wow, like just wearing this scarf for like 3 to 6 months. And I was, already had like sort of onset hypothyroidism. And within 3 to 6 months of covering their neck with a scarf, they've gone back to their doctors and it's literally disappeared. It's the most bizarre thing. And again, this is anecdotal. People, it's not clinical trialed in that respect, but it's good to hear of these real case studies of people that have taken that advice and tried it and seen it, improve. So
definitely,
it was very nice to hear.
Yeah, but a lot of the a lot of the women listening and a lot of my clients are doing a lot of the other things that we hear about all the time. So they're eating an anti-inflammatory, gluten-free diet, and they're taking the supplements, and they're healing their gut, which are spoken about for Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. But maybe something like that is a key factor that's been overlooked. So yeah, love that tip, and I'll be passing that on and sharing it with everyone. So speaking of hormones, we've touched on the benefits of melatonin and how it can help with sleep, obviously. And when you're sleeping well, your mood and your energy and your hormones are going to be more regulated. But I want to dive in, because this podcast is the Hormones in Harmony podcast, and I have a lot of women listening with PCOS or Hashimoto's or PMS, even infertility. Can you talk a bit more about the importance of having an optimal circadian rhythm with female hormones and how it's so interconnected?
Yeah, absolutely. The two sort of biggest hormones in women that become a problem when you talk of like polycystic ovary syndrome is two. It's estrogen and a disruption of the estrogen cycle. So whether it's too much or too little, or whether it's not functioning and secreting correctly. Estrogen is, again, another hormone that's governed by light and dark cycles. We produce the majority of it in the absence of blue and green light and whilst we sleep. So you can see that if we're exposing our bodies to unnecessary quantities of artificial blue light and telling it's the daytime all the time, we're going to have very irregular hormones when it comes to estrogen. And another hormone that is really governed by inadequate sleep and lack of darkness is something called prolactin. So it's the hormone that's found in, eventually breast milk down the line as well. But that is actually the disruption of that hormone. Too much, too little can lead to issues such as your polycystic ovary syndrome as well. So we've got to bear in mind that when we look at light, we're not just talking about melatonin, we're talking about some of these other reproductive hormones as well. And sort of going back to melatonin, I mentioned it a little bit earlier in our conversation, that there are sites within the female reproductive system where melatonin is produced in massive quantities, okay? And that's the placenta and that's the ovaries. And as I mentioned earlier, melatonin is not just a sleep hormone, it's an antioxidant. And we know this from studies. And we also know the fact that if we wanted to sleep, why is melatonin being produced in the ovaries and placenta? It didn't make sense. And then they discovered that it was a massive antioxidant. And it can only be produced, again, like we said, melatonin can only be produced optimally in the absence of blue and green light after dark. So if we're allowing that light to pass through our eyes, we're not going to get optimal levels of melatonin produced at those sites, at the placenta and in the ovaries, which means that reproductive health then becomes an issue. Ovarian cancers and not allowing the correct, I guess, function of placentas in women as well can actually cause issues in relation to fertility and conception rates. So we've just got to be mindful that, we're not just trying to improve our sleep here, we're trying to improve the amount of melatonin that's produced, which will actually help with, reproductive health for women as well. So you've got to be very mindful of those things. And, another major issue, it doesn't just stop at women as well. And you might have quite a lot of women that listen to your show as opposed to men, but where I've mentioned this in the past, a lot of the women have gone away and spoken to their husbands. Maybe they're looking to plan for a baby and they want the best success rates. And you find that, actually, before I go on to that as well, I think it's female menstrual cycles as well are very much governed by circadian rhythms. I think it's probably be aloof if I didn't say anything about that as well. And there's a very, very famous study that was done on night shift nurse workers. And they looked at loads of different sort of factors in their health. And basically they were all rubbish because they worked night shifts and their circadian rhythm wasn't functioning correctly. But one thing that night shift workers had that was massively different to people that worked during the day was they had irregular menstrual cycles, and they also had heavier periods as well, as opposed to people that work during, women that work during the day. And they put that down to the circadian disruption and the too much exposure of light. Breast cancer is another issue as well. That's on the increase as well. And there are studies out there that allude to the fact that melatonin can't be produced naturally in that area because of the exposure to blue light after dark. So people need to bear that in mind as well. But, equally, people aren't getting out in the sun and exposing, those parts of the body to the sun. And, it's culturally in society, it's not really, sort of it's seen as taboo, and I'm not saying people to just get naked in public, don't do that, please. But maybe in your back garden in the summer, maybe some topless sunbathing might be needed in order to allow restorative colors of light to be in that area and help you, protect yourself against potential issues with your breasts later on in life. But going back to men, testosterone is produced in larger quantities in the evenings. And it peaks at around 7 a.m., which is in line with when the sun rises. So if you're looking to conceive, get your partner to bed early, get them rising early, and maybe look to have sex in the mornings. That's probably when men's sperm is going to be at its highest. Seasonality as well comes into it for men. In the springtime, men will have higher sperm counts than other months, and it's actually lowest in the summer. So, you need to look at the springtime. It makes complete sense because spring is the time for nature to, other mammals and birds and things to reproduce. They know this. Another big one for males is, it is like there's an antibody. It's called like anti-sperm antibody. So ASA. And studies have shown that this is higher in men who go to bed later than men who go to bed earlier. So there was a trial that came out that showed that men who went to bed around about midnight or later had a very, very high levels of this anti-sperm antibody in their system the next morning, which means, as it sounds, it's not a nice thing. It's going to destroy sperm. So your sperm count will be lower and the quality of sperm will be lower. So people that went to bed before 10 p.m. in the evenings had hardly any of this antibody in their system. So you then tie it into the circadian rhythms. It's a circadian issue. You need to have a functioning circadian rhythm in order to be optimal from a reproductive hormone standpoint. And when it comes to birth as well, many births in women happen in the early hours of the morning. Melatonin typically peaks in humans around about 1 to 3 a.m. in the morning. And in order to allow for birth to happen, you need to have melatonin mixed with oxytocin, which then induces labor. So there is no sort of surprise that most of these births happen in the middle of the night when melatonin is at its highest. So if you want to maybe have an easier pregnancy, you'll want to have higher levels of melatonin to be able to mix with more oxytocin and be able to have a much more smoother birth. And we're seeing a lot more now when you look at some of the stats is that births aren't happening at that time, and it's declining at that time because our melatonin levels are all over the place. And sometimes we're seeing late pregnancies because melatonin levels aren't high enough to induce labor. So you need to look at that as well. And supplementing on melatonin isn't an option as well, because you're in essence taking an exogenous hormone. You don't know how much is a safe level, how much is it's going to impact your system. And melatonin is produced in the absence of blue and green light. And if we're taking melatonin supplementation under this light, you're going to wreak havoc to your system. Prostate cancer as well in men has been linked to low levels of melatonin, which is a circadian issue. But one of the most important studies that came out, it was related, and this was about 2 or 3 months ago, was related to chrononutrition. So when the baby's actually been born, a baby doesn't have a circadian rhythm, and it will be how that they're basically raised and under what light they're raised into how quickly and how healthily they develop that circadian rhythm. Also, we thought there is actually something else at play. So in this clinical trial, the PhDs that did this basically took breast milk from lactating women during the daylight hours, and they took breast milk from them in nighttime hours, and they tested it for hormone composition. Breast milk that was pumped during the day was high in cortisol, okay, which is the hormone that allows us to feel alert and awake. When they tested the breast milk that was pumped after sunset, so in the night hours, there was 0 cortisol in it, but it was very high in tryptophan and melatonin. So this was what the authors coined. They coined something called chrononutrition, that it's actually the mother's breast milk that is sending signals to the baby to entrain and develop a circadian rhythm. So what's happening in this day and age is that people are pre-pumping breast milk probably during the day, putting it in the fridge, loaded with cortisol, and then giving that to their baby during a night feed, making them feel very awake, taking, and that's probably why they're not getting back to sleep. So a simple hack is just label when you're pumping your breast milk. Have half of it pumped during the day, half of it pumped after dark, and then you're going to get different hormone compositions, which will help entrain babies' circadian rhythm correctly, and actually allow you guys to get more sleep, because the baby will sleep better and it won't sleep as much during the day. It will be more active because it will have more cortisol during the day. And then when you look at mum's circadian rhythms whilst they're having the incubation period, when they're holding the baby inside them, studies have also shown that women that have a disrupted circadian rhythm, so they're going to bed late, getting up late, feeling fatigued, exposing themselves to blue light, their babies have a higher risk of actually having more behavioral and psychological issues in their younger years. So it's very important for mum to have a healthy circadian rhythm when they're carrying a baby as well, in order to give them the best starts in life. So I think that probably summarizes it in a nutshell without sort of taking too much of a deep dive into the mechanisms. But yeah, it's very, very important, and it very much impacts, fertility and reproductive health in men and women.
Absolutely, and that simple tip could be an absolute game changer for a lot of new mums, because they're already probably sleep deprived and depleted, and if they're giving the baby the daytime milk, and it's going to be more difficult to get it to sleep, and it's going to be screaming and crying, so that alone could make a massive difference. And it just makes sense evolutionarily, and even the past 50 years, 100 years, the earth has changed so much, like our technology and lighting now and smartphones and all of that, and our biology hasn't really adapted. So we are still very cyclical beings, and the moon cycles and the sun cycles really affect the menstrual cycle length and just crazy stuff, but it's all been forgotten, and all of this like traditional wisdom has been missed. And with the breastfeeding as well, I think another mistake people make is they turn on all of the lights, and when they go into the baby's room, there's lamps and lights everywhere. So could you give some tips if someone's a new mom and they are breastfeeding? Would you recommend them wearing the glasses, and what could they do for the child to protect the circadian rhythm at that time?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the biggest issues is actually the night feeds and performing the night feeds under artificial blue light. So yeah, you need, wherever the baby's sleeping, whether it be in your room or in its own room, you need to install red light bulbs into those rooms, or you want to have some sort of night feeding lamp that contains and emits red light, because red doesn't disrupt melatonin. And it's not just about protecting your own eyes, it's about protecting the baby and the child's eyes as well from being disrupted in terms of the wrong light exposure. So typically, yeah, we always recommend you wear those red glasses when you get up to give that night feed. So you're not telling your brain when you switch on your light that, oh, it's daytime again, and then you struggle to get back to sleep. If you put the red glasses on, go into the baby's room, get a nice maybe salt lamp or a red light lamp, or even red lights in the room, you can switch those on. Give the baby the breast milk that was pumped during the night time, or whether you're feeding it directly, that's obviously going to be more beneficial. And then you'll be able to go after the feed, baby will go to sleep quicker, and you'll actually go back to sleep a lot quicker as well, because you haven't got that message going to your brain to tell you that it's the middle of the day and you need to get up and stop producing melatonin. So they're the best and simplest hacks for that, for sure.
They benefit everyone. Everyone's going to be happier that way. And you mentioned before the really negative effects of night shift work. Obviously, it needs to be done. Someone needs to be at the hospital and the police and all of that. So if someone is listening and they're like, oh my God, I am screwed, I'm doing the complete opposite as to what I should be doing, what tips or what hacks can night shift workers do? Should they be trying to mimic the daytime when they're in the night, or are they just trying to follow as much as they can the natural circadian rhythm?
No, they number one, like, you know, regardless of what you do with night shift work, and it's sad because it's typically the people we need, you know, to do those jobs, you're never going to have optimal health, regardless of what hacks you do. You can improve your situation, but you're never going to be optimal. And I have to lay that down, and it sounds harsh, but it's fact of the matter, okay? But in terms of hacks to improve it, you know, going from maybe a 0 to a 5 on the scale, there are things you can do, okay? So you're going to get a lot more inflammation when you work in your night shifts, because you're exposing yourself to only artificial light. There's no natural light around. So when you finish your night shift, you need to be grounding. So get your shoes and socks off and walk across the grass or the beach for a little bit, and allow that DC electric current to heal any of the inflammation. Clear computer glasses when you're working night shift isn't going to cut it. You need the yellow ones that I'm wearing, because you need to filter a lot more of that artificial light, because you're not getting any of the natural light. Then you would reverse it. So 3 hours before you want to go to bed, you need to make sure you're wearing the red Sleep Plus glasses that we have created. But before you do that, you really want to try and get a couple of hours of sunshine after your shift to allow natural light to be in your life. Otherwise, if you don't, that's going to be a major issue and lead to anxiety, depression, along with a lot of other major issues later on in life. So that's very important. I would also suggest no caffeine, because that will impact your sleep. And also looking at your meals. So when you wake up to start your shift, having a nice big meal, and then finish eating maybe about 8 hours before you plan to go to bed, because digestion will get in the way of melatonin production and deep and REM sleep. So they're probably the best hacks. Cold shower after your shift as well would be fantastic. That will help reduce inflammation. But yeah, eye protection is very, very key. Yellow lenses and then red lenses. And ideally, change to day shifts where you can, but if you can't, then those hacks will definitely help you improve improve your wellness and well-being a lot.
Mm-hmm. And again, I don't think people even do any of those things, so they just try to go to sleep as soon as they finish work, and they're just feeling terrible. And then what about on days off? Do you recommend to try and stick to that same schedule, or just try and get into a normal, maybe if it's 2 to 3 days off? What do you recommend there?
Sorry, I missed that bit. It just sort of broke up a little bit.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
when they have days off, so say they have like
Yes.
3 days off in a row, do you recommend trying to follow a natural circadian rhythm on those days, or just try and stay as consistent as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whatever they do in those off periods is not going to be optimal. But if they can, it's the constant switching back and forward that's the issue. But also the issue is staying in the same nocturnal pattern as well. So it's a really difficult one. They really just have to get out of night shifts if they want to be healthy. But, if I had to choose one, it would be revert back to not being nocturnal in your days off, and get as much sun as you can, get as much grounding as you can, and get outside so much. Get your sunglasses off, no sunscreen, get out there all day from AM through to PM. And that will go a long way into sort of helping your circadian systems. And, rather than just remaining nocturnal, because you're going to end up getting less sun that way. So yeah, definitely try and revert back where you can. It's just going to be a tough life. It really is.
Yeah. And just for general sleep hygiene tips, I'll say someone's really struggling with falling to sleep or just getting good quality, waking up feeling refreshed. What are some other things apart from avoiding blue light in the evening, wearing the glasses? Any other of your favorite tips?
Yeah, absolutely. There's loads of things you can do. And one thing with sleep is that there's a lot of things that can go in your arsenal that you can use, but not all of them will work for everyone. So I've trialed them all, and some of them work for me and some of them don't. So in terms of better sleep, diffusing lavender into your room increases something called GABA, which helps get you into a deep state of sleep. So try that. Just a general sort of water diffuser, and put some lavender essential oil in there is really good. You can also have a spray for your pillow. Magnesium before bed to supplement on that can help as well. Complete blackout in your sleeping area. So whether that's wearing one of our Remedy sleep masks, or wearing, having 100% blackout curtains really helps as well. So definitely look at that. Our body can sense light whilst we sleep, so 100% blackout is key. Powering down your devices at least a couple of hours before bed, regardless of whether you're wearing blue blockers or not, to not stimulate the brain into being active and to wind down. Meditation works very well for a lot of people, whether that be sort of mindfulness or manifestations, or whatever sort of meditation people want to do. A cold room is very important. A warm bedroom is not good for deep and REM sleep. So you want to be about 16 to 18 degrees centigrade if you can. So don't have that heating too high in the winter, and don't have the aircon too high in the summer. So you need to look at that as well. What else is good before bed? Not eating after dark is very beneficial for sleep. So having even if it's just not having a big dinner, maybe just having a light snack in the evening if you need to eat, is very good. Glycine is another supplement you can take before bed, which has been known to improve sleep. It's a bit like a sugar, but it's not a sugar. So you can try that. Not eating fats and proteins before bed. If you need to eat, make it carbohydrate, typically a simple carbohydrate. So like something like a piece of fruit. Bananas, very good. High in potassium is a good hack there. Warm and cold showers. Some people swear by a nice warm shower before bed helps them. Other people say a cold shower helps them. So I think that those sort of hacks are really good. One other one that works well for a lot of people is binaural beats. So you can listen to those as you're drifting off to sleep, which are specific frequencies of sounds that you can listen to just through Spotify or iTunes. So you can get them for free, that mimic basically the brain waves that go through your head. And you can get ones with delta waves, which is the type of wave that induces deep sleep. So you can, what these platforms say, that when you listen to these binaural beats, it syncs your brain waves to get into deeper sleep quicker. So that can be done as well. So that's probably the top hacks that I would recommend. Some good ones in there that have worked for me, and some that have worked well for other people that have used them but not so well for me. So you just got to experiment with them all and see what happens and what works for you.
Absolutely. And I love that a lot of them are free, easily accessible to a lot of people. And the carbohydrate thing, am I right, is the tryptophan to serotonin to melatonin conversion. Is that the reason for carbohydrates alone as a snack working well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you're building up serotonin from sun during the day. So the more of that, the better, because it then synthesizes with tryptophan later on in the day to produce melatonin, but it can only be done in the absence of blue and green light. So we've got to remember that as well. So yes, that's exactly right.
Amazing. And then to finish up, let's talk a bit more about the products you have on offer. So we've mentioned a few. You're wearing is it Summer Glow, the name of the ones?
That's correct.
Yeah. I've got my Sleep Plus ones here, so we can model them right now.
Yeah,
so yeah, I'm not going to put them on now because it's morning, it's 10 a.m. for me, so I'm not going to mess with any circadian rhythm. I'll put them on at sunset. Is that the ideal time? So when the sun, probably like 4:30 p.m. here, which is sad, but
so after it's set, that's key. Not before it sets, because the sun actually emits its highest level of blue light at sunset. Which then cues the brain to be like, right, blue light now is going to plummet to nothing and I can start releasing the melatonin. So once that sun sets and artificial light starts going on, get your Sleep Plus glasses on, because they're the ones that block between 400 and 550 nanometers and will get you going to bed correctly in terms of the circadian standpoint, but also it will get you producing as much melatonin as you possibly can, which is a great antioxidant as well. The Summer Glows are for winter and for people that are sensitive to light during the day. So you wouldn't wear these outside, you just wear them indoors during the day when there's artificial light. And we also have a pair of clear glasses as well called Blue Light, and they're like computer glasses. So they're great for the summer when you're working in an office, when there is some artificial light present, but you've got some good natural light coming in through your windows. Then you just need to take the edge off the blue, which is why we use the computer glasses. So typically everyone goes for all three because light needs change with the seasons and depending on how you're feeling. I wear the yellows. I have a sensitivity to blue light because I develop migraines. So during the day, if I'm exposed to artificial light, I'll wear these more often than not to protect my eyes from that sensitivity. So I always say to people, if you've listened to this and it's really interested you and you're interested in the glasses, definitely email us. It's just on the website, BLUblox.com, BLUblox.com, which I'm sure you'll link. And people can go to the contacts section and actually message us and say, look, this is my light situation. This is how I'm feeling. What glasses would be best for me and what free hacks on top of getting the glasses can I do to make my personal situation better? Because light's different for us all. We all live different lives and we have different problems in our lives, and a lot of them can be repaired with proper light hygiene. And we're all more than happy to hear them, and we're more than happy to provide our advice on a sort of custom level as well for people.
Yeah, I love that you offer that service and it personalize it a bit more. And I'll just give my little story of how my sleep has been transformed with the glasses.
Oh, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, because I've been wearing the regular Amazon ones for a few years now, like 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And again, I noticed a difference and found improvement with that. And when I wouldn't wear them, I could tell a difference. Yes. But I heard about your company at the end of last year. And hearing you speak, I was like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. Like, there's the science behind it. And they've been made in a proper setting as opposed to a factory. So I was like, I'll just try them out. And yes, they're a little bit more expensive than what you get on Amazon, but I think they're worth it. And the first week, because I got them on the Black Friday sale, so I got them a bit before Christmas. And I don't know if it was just a Christmas break or that combined with the glasses. I was sleeping 12 plus hours every single night. Wow. And I would wake up feeling so refreshed. And after that, it balanced out. It wasn't like I was exhausted the whole time. My body was just like so sleep deprived by the sounds of things. And they've made a massive difference. And now I wear them in the evenings because I still need to work on my laptop and do emails and stuff in the evening, which isn't ideal, but at least I can feel a little bit better about doing so. And at any point when I lift them up, it's like a it's like a flashing light. It's so bright when you see the screen.
Yeah.
And I even have the blue light filters on my iPhone and on my laptop, and it's still so different to have these on. And some people think that it's going to distort the colors of everything, but it doesn't really make a huge difference, and you really get used to it after a while. So I personally love mine. What I will say is that they're a little bit loose on my head. So I don't know if you have different sizes and things.
We do,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I
we've
wasn't
got loads
aware
of
of
different
that.
sizes. Yeah, it's
Okay.
difficult to select online because
Definitely.
you're not physically trying them on.
Mhm.
But we offer easy exchanges for people that have
Okay.
that problem. And if people want help choosing before they buy, we've got a new face shape guide as well to help out. And we also do custom frames. So if you have a pair of old sunnies that you want to throw out after listening to me sort of preach on for the last hour and a half, then send them to us and we'll put our lenses in them and you can use them as blue blockers. So
Perfect.
that's nice and easy as well.
But I highly recommend, worth every penny, and I'm slowly building my collection of them as well. I'm going to get them all. And the sleep mask as well, that sounds like a great one.
Yes.
Some sleep masks are absolutely terrible and then more irritating and make my sleep more disturbed. So yeah, I think you've got a really amazing company going on. And like you said, you're growing and expanding and you're reaching so many people, and the results really do show for themselves. And I'm really happy to have had you on the podcast today, and I appreciate all the information. I think you're just a wealth of knowledge, and you can tell us so much passion and information in that head of yours, and you just want to spread the word. So thank you, Andy, so much for your time today.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really honored to have been on it and be able to speak to your beautiful community. And if we help just one person from this conversation, then our work's done. So thank you so much.